Hello, everyone. Thank you all for joining us today. Today, we're going to be talking about the VITA Leadership Institute analysis. We're going to get started in about 1 minute, so just grab some water, grab a snack, settle in, and we'll be right back. All right, thank you all for joining us today. Today we're going to be taking a look at the VITA Leadership Institute. But before we get started, I'd like to introduce myself. My name is Tupa Haveka. I'm the Program Associate on the Field Engagement Team at Prosperity Now. And before we get started, just like to go over a few housekeeping announcements. This webinar will be recorded and will be made available to all registrants within a week. All webinar attendees are muted to ensure sound quality. You can ask a question or share your thoughts at any time by typing into the text box of your GoToWebinar control panel. And if you experience any technical issues, please email us at gotomeeting@prosperitynow.org. For the agenda today, you will hear a welcome from our sponsor. We'll then move to a welcome from TON. We'll then discuss the lessons from the VLI. We'll discuss program reflections and then close with some next steps. Today, we are joined by great speakers. You'll hear from Lisa Price, who is the Vice President and Program Manager of the Financial Health Philanthropy Program at Wells Fargo. We're joined by Rebecca Thompson, who is the Associate Director of Field Engagement and the Taxpayer Opportunity Network at Prosperity Now, and Dara Duratinsky, who is the Senior Program Manager of the Field Engagement Team at Prosperity Now. We're also joined by Carrie Gladstone, who is the Senior Director of Asset Building Strategies at Granite United Way, and Katrina Madden, who is the Financial Stability Outreach Manager at United Way of West Florida. And with that said, I'm going to turn things over to Lisa to get us started.
Great. Well, thank you so much, Tupa, and welcome everyone. We're so excited to have you here with us today. And on behalf of Wells Fargo, thank you for being here to take a look back at the learnings of the VITA Leadership Institute. Last year, Wells Fargo made an investment in Prosperity Now to strengthen and support the VITA program and to expand its reach and impact. Prosperity Now launched the VITA Leadership Institute last year at VITACon, while we also celebrated the 50th anniversary of the VITA program. At Wells Fargo, the foundation wants to find and scale solutions to create pathways for people and communities who face persistent poverty so that they can build wealth and inspire hope. We are focused in 3 areas, which are highly interconnected and where we have significant business expertise. Those are housing affordability, small business growth, and financial health. When we think of financial health, the VITA program and EITC are a fundamental part to achieving financial independence and prosperity. And as we know, the EITC can be the single largest infusion of cash that many families see all year long. That's why the VITA Leadership Institute was created, to build a pipeline of VITA leaders that would work closely with Prosperity Now to receive training and technical assistance over a full year. 10 VITA coalitions were selected to participate, representing several states, and these leaders worked hand in hand with Prosperity Now on volunteer management, service delivery, program operations, marketing, outreach, and fundraising. Well, as we know, this year didn't quite go as planned, and COVID-19 had huge impacts on the way VITA coalitions operated and how clients were able to access their services. So the VITA Leadership Institute had to pivot and make quick changes. And so I'm so excited for you to get to hear from some of the coalition partners today to hear how they were able to adapt and quickly make changes. So with that, let's go ahead and get started. Again, thank you for being here today, and I'll turn it over to Rebecca.
Thank you, Lisa. Good afternoon, everyone. And Lisa, let me say once again, thank you for your and the support of the Wells Fargo Foundation in our work, for supporting our work to build and strengthen leaders in the VITA community. So good afternoon, everybody, and welcome to today's webinar, where, as Lisa mentioned, we're sharing some of the results and some of our learnings from the first year-long VITA Leadership Institute. I hope that you all are doing well, that everyone is in good spirits, and hopefully you're experiencing some good weather today. I've heard recently that it's expected to be a mild winter in many parts of the country, and so hopefully you are in one of those areas that is experiencing at least a pleasurable fall. Again, as Lisa mentioned, and as is on the screen, I'm Rebecca Thompson. I'm the Associate Director of Field Engagement and the Taxpayer Opportunity Network here at Prosperity Now. And I'm going to provide a brief overview, high-level overview of the VLI, and then I'm going to turn it over to my colleague, Dara Duratinsky, to share some of our outcomes, and then to lead the discussion with a couple of our VLI participants. All right, so let's get going here. So we started the VLI, as Lisa mentioned, on the next slide, with the vision of really building a pipeline of leaders who could scale high quality, accurate, free tax preparation services for low income taxpayers. And what we hope to achieve through this was to increase our members' capacity to design and deliver asset building programs. We hope to help them to gather new ideas to strengthen their work and lay the groundwork for future innovations. We were hoping to help them to extend their reach, to incrementally serve more taxpayers in their communities. We also wanted to improve their visibility and reputation among key audiences, not only within the Taxpayer Opportunity Network, but locally and nationally. And then finally, we were working towards helping to mobilize and engage more people from these various communities and nationally. So on the next slide, we talk a little more about the key components of the VLI. So the first one was VITACon, which we were so delighted to see so many of you there last year. And believe me, we're thinking about what the plans might be for next year already. So we invited, and we're happy to have all of our VLI cohort actually attend VITACon. Then we also hosted a series of peer calls. We provided that individual one-on-one technical assistance. We had planned an in-person convening, which, as Lisa mentioned, quickly shifted to a virtual convening and a series of grant workshops. And then we provided various leadership development opportunities for our VLI cohort throughout the course of the year. So as Lisa mentioned, some of the topics that we covered included, the basic nuts and bolts of the VITA program: volunteer management, service delivery options, marketing and outreach, program operations, fundraising and budgeting, program evaluation, and of course that all-important IRS VITA grant application. So we spent time with our cohort covering about 90 minutes at least on each one of these topics. On the next slide, I wanted to tell you guys a little bit about our selection process. First thing being that we had an abbreviated application window. So we actually provided about a week for folks to submit their applications. I know that many of you here probably submitted applications for the VITA Leadership Institute cohort. And so I did want to take some time to kind of frame what some of our priorities were for those who are curious. First of all, we looked at the coalition status and whether or not they were leading a coalition or interested in, and how far along that coalition was. We looked at whether or not they were organizations or leaders of color, because we do prioritize building up leaders of color here at Prosperity Now, and organizations of color. we looked at whether or not the services that each coalition or each program provides were designed with a racial equity lens, and whether or not they were offering additional financial capability services, more than just tax prep, and whether or not they were interested or participating in VITA and EITC advocacy, which speaks to our efforts to increase mobilization. And then also we asked folks how their participation in the VLI would benefit their programs, their coalitions, and their communities. And so we actually took a look at all of those different criteria, as well as we were very careful to be sure that we selected people with beginning experience in the VITA program. And so those who were novices and just starting out, folks with intermediate experience, somewhere in between the range of 3 to 10 years or 5 to 10 years, as well as advanced experience. And so we were looking at bill leaders also who have been around for a while. And then finally, we looked at the status of their IRS VITA grant. And we really did prioritize organizations who either received a small VITA grant or had not received funding through the IRS VITA grant, because we wanted to strengthen those programs and help them to be in a position to apply for a grant and receive and be awarded those grants funds. So with all that, what you see is a listing of our cohort members. The 10 programs that were selected were El Programa Hispano Catolico, Granite United Way, High Point VITA Coalition, Louisville Asset Building Coalition, United Way of West Florida, Central Arkansas Development Corporation, Cherokee Nation, United Way of the River Cities, Jefferson Economic Development Institute, and CDFI of the Tohono O'odham Nation. So we were very pleased and honored to have the opportunity to work with all of these programs over the course of the last year. And with that, I've given you a little bit background information. I'm going to turn it over to Dara to share some of the lessons.
Great. Thank you, Rebecca. Again, I'm Dara Duratinsky, Senior Program Manager of Field Engagement, and what I'm going to do is go over some of the lessons and tips that we learned from our VLI cohort member through the series of peer calls that we held. So I'll go topic by topic and just read off some of the highlights that I think might be interesting to you. But just know that all of these will be shared in the next few days with you in a series of information guides and worksheets, and they're really meant to help you think about your program at a high level in order to really work with and apply for the IRS VITA grant. So next slide, please. Our first 2 calls covered volunteer management and marketing and outreach, and we really wanted to get some creative tips from our VLI cohort and how they do these 2 things, and also some other leaders within the Taxpayer Opportunity Network who shared during these calls. And what we learned is that you really need to creatively recruit volunteers, because this is the thing that a lot of our cohort members, and I'm sure a lot of you, struggle with, is that recruitment piece. So one of the things we learned was to utilize local colleges and universities for student volunteers. There are some classes that will offer extra credit to students if they become a VITA volunteer. And there's also several students who have community service obligations at these local colleges and universities, so it's important to connect with those departments. In addition to that, large corporations have employee volunteer service hours that they give their employees. So it would be worth contacting some local corporations that might be located in your area, their HR departments, to help set up those relationships. Another important aspect in retaining volunteers is that volunteer recognition piece. You know, if you can, and of course right now we're all working in a virtual space, so a virtual party, maybe a certificate recognizing their hard work over the last few months, or the few months over the VITA, tax season, as well as some public thank yous so that they know that they're appreciated. With marketing and outreach, that's another area where we're looking for some creative tips. You know, I'm sure a lot of you utilize emails and newsletters as well as handing out brochures and flyers where you can. We had some who suggested using movie theater ads, and again, this is in a non-virtual space, but they use those ads that play before movies to market their program to potential clients. Others work with local utility companies to insert that programmatic info in utility statements. And one thing that they also did was set up some one-pagers and table tents in community spaces, even restaurants, so that maybe someone will see it as they walk in and exit and become interested, pick up that flyer or go to the website to sign up to volunteer or to learn more about how they can access your services. Next slide. Another call topic we had was some service delivery options, and we actually held this one before COVID-19 really forced many of us, I'm sure all of us, to move in-person services to virtual. But even so, we talked a lot about alternative service delivery, including virtual and drop-off methods. And so the graphic that you see here goes over what a potential alternative service delivery looks like, doing things through software that might have clients sign up for your VITA services. They'll send you documents, you'll open up a ticket, and then your reviewer and your tax preparer will do these things virtually. And then they'll receive some emails or text updates on the status of their return. We also surveyed our members about what they used in terms of alternative services before COVID-19, and already 60% were using drop-off or virtual VITA, and 50% utilized My Free Taxes. And I know once we all went virtual, one of the big concerns was making sure that volunteers would be open to trying that new virtual service delivery method. But before COVID-19 happened, 86% of our cohort members said that their volunteers would be open to trying a new service like this. And also, you know, we're still all learning about the best ways to do virtual service delivery. So if you have any tips about virtual VITA that you want to share, type it in the Q&A box or chat it to us, and we'll see if we can read those out later in the call. Next slide, please. We then went over program operations and program evaluation, and learning from our VLI cohort members, we learned that most were satisfied with their volunteer training and retention, but not recruitment. That was one area where they felt they could improve. They also felt that their processes for intake and review were good, but maybe not the equipment or the software they had to do that with. In addition, volunteer management software was a high need, and most were not satisfied with translation assistance or program funding. So these are areas where they felt they could improve. With program evaluation, we learned that members mostly collect data on the returns prepared, amount of the refund, the amount of the EITC refund, and the amount of EITC returns that they did. And they felt that 80% of our members conduct a volunteer satisfaction survey, which is important in order to improve your recruitment and retention strategies. Next slide, please. Again, I think a lot of our cohort members felt like they could improve in their program funding, and so the fundraising and budgeting call was hoping to go back to the fundamentals with a fundraising appeal for sources outside of the IRS VITA grant. And we have these 4 questions that you should answer in every fundraising appeal that we shared with our members and that we're sharing here on this slide. Answering the questions, why me, why now, what for, and who says really gets you to think about that quick elevator pitch and what the impact is of your program in your community. We learned from our VLI members that their funding sources are pretty vast, but they get these from, in addition to the IRS VITA grant, local government, so local health and human service departments and other entities like that, large financial institutions, as well as community banks. We were lucky to work with 2 tribal organizations, and they utilize tribal funds for their program. And there's, energy and utility companies are great to work with in terms of fundraising, because they offer, they know the importance of people. When they receive their refund, they often pay bills with that. So they're really interested in making sure that they're investing in their communities. Next slide. We also learned a lot about what this program, the VITA Leadership Institute, meant to our cohort members. So did we achieve the outcomes and the goals that we set out to achieve at the beginning of our program? So when it comes to members increasing their program capacity to deliver asset building programs, including VITA, 9 out of 10 cohort members now consider themselves knowledgeable or very knowledgeable about volunteer management, program operations, and program evaluation. And 9 out of 10 applied something they learned from volunteer management to their work. As Rebecca mentioned earlier, we also did one-on-one technical assistance with these members and worked with them to build capacity building plans, where they outlined a few goals that they wanted to achieve over the course of the year. And all members met at least one of their programmatic goals for the year, which is great considering how much COVID-19 threw a wrench into everyone's year-long plans. Members gathered new ideas to strengthen their work and lay the groundwork for future innovation. So members indicated they learned quite a bit about data collection, alternative service delivery, VITA advocacy, and available resources during VITACon, which is wonderful. Members expanded their reach to incrementally serve more low-income taxpayers in their communities. So they especially learned and implemented alternative tax prep services like drop-off, FSA, and virtual VITA. And a lot of these were due to COVID-19, but these are alternative services that can really carry out well into the future and help with outreach, especially in rural areas. Coalitions reported adding a total of 36 new members over the past year, and they served 479 taxpayers through 20 different financial capability services. So that further cements, in my opinion, how VITA is this entryway, this gateway into overall financial capability and financial health. Next slide, please. Members improved their visibility and reputation among key audiences locally and nationally. So 7 members added new program funders in the past year, and 1 added a funder to their coalition. And this was, us providing those leadership development opportunities and really making sure that our cohort members were visible nationally. And members mobilized and engaged more people from their communities. We had originally hoped that if we had held an in-person meeting, that we would be able to go with these cohort members to Capitol Hill for advocacy, but we found that that was not possible this year. And so our members participated virtually in our advocacy center by emailing or calling their policymakers to support VITA and EITC policies. So half the members participated in federal advocacy, and 6 members mobilized their coalition members and local partners in advocacy. So considering how tough of a year it was, I think that our cohort members made some impressive successes. And here we highlight what each or almost every one of our members accomplished, including setting up loan programs, refining and expanding coalitions and adding members to those coalitions. Jefferson Economic Development Institute was able to start a coalition over the past year. Central Arkansas Development Council expanded services to a new county, which was one of their major goals. And Louisville Asset Building Coalition merged with another coalition in their community and more than doubled and diversified their board as well as their coalition members. So we're really proud and happy to have worked so closely And with that, we'll go to the next slide, where I'll introduce our two of our cohort members. And we really wanted to get their perspective on what happened over the past year, not just within the VITA Leadership Institute, but within their programs. So Carrie Gladstone, Senior Director of Asset Building Strategies at Granite United Way, and Katrina Madden, Financial Stability Outreach Manager, United Way of West Florida. Welcome. So I'll start out with a first question, and I'll start with Carrie first. What were some of your big successes over the past year working with VLI?
Well, thank you, Dara, and good afternoon or good morning, everyone. It's good to see everybody, or at least see their names. I feel like I could answer that first question by saying, yeah, I think, first of all, we need to divide the pre-COVID from the what happened since, in terms of thinking about some of the successes that not necessarily our program has had, but as I look at the list of all the participants, I'm realizing that we are really part of a community that has been growing. And ever since I heard Rebecca and her U.S. Senator coin the term tax nerd, I've looked lovingly on that term and embraced my inner tax nerd. I should just say I'm one of the more advanced, I think is the term Rebecca used, people in terms of experience. This will be my 17th tax season involved with VITA. I started as just someone who had started a new job previous to Granite United Way and didn't know anything about the VITA program at that point, but was told, oh, you're going to tag along with your predecessor in your new job, and then next year you're going to be the site coordinator. Okay, so if that resonates with any of the folks out there, I'd say you're not alone. So it was a matter of just getting more familiar and really, I think being able to be present at VITACon, to be in person with the folks from Wells Fargo. Thank you very much for your support of this program in New Hampshire. We're grateful for the support of our Reading Plus program. So, we're utilizing your resources in different ways, as well as, certainly all of the participants here. I think getting familiar with folks, Eileen, I hope you haven't been too badly hit by the wildfires in the wine country. Terry, good to see you. Hope things are going well in Cleveland. And Penny, in Texas, you're doing well also. So, having had a chance to meet some of the folks, whether it's in previous convenings or sessions as recently as this week, I think there's that integration and that we're really able to call on one another. VLI did that in a more focused way. But generally speaking, the tax roundtable has really been a good resource for folks. And then in terms of the biggest success, as we switched through COVID and demonstrated that we can pivot and we can take on some different things. We'd had some experience with virtual VITA prior to COVID, one being in what was considered the traditional, or this is the reason that virtual was established, to serve more rural areas and parts of our territories that could not be served by a full VITA site, and to have had a one-person office, a satellite office of an affordable housing agency that was located on the Canadian border, was able to be an intake site and did 35 tax returns remotely, and working in partnership with one of our sites that was more than an hour's drive south of there, was something that was, got our feet wet. We were able to utilize the learning from the session on alternative delivery systems, and really when we were forced into that, I think it was just to be able to respond to that in a very timely way, to collapse our VITA sites into basically 2 lead sites for virtual, all virtual, and had several other sites with either site coordinators acting as assistants to those sites and volunteers from a number of sites who were in line as backup to try to meet the need of the clients during the pandemic, who were really freaking out, and to help calm them down and get their taxes done going all the way to July was something that I would reflect on as one of our biggest successes of the past year.
Mm-hmm. That's great. Thank you. We have people supporting and saying that they're also tax nerds too in the questions box. So we can unite on that front here. So Katrina, same question. What were some of your big successes over the past year working with VLI?
I have a couple of big successes. The one thing I do want to mention is that being part of the VITA Leadership team, it made you guys really focus not on expanding our VITA program, but also wrapping around our other financial stability initiatives to go in line with VITA. And my biggest initiative that I had been pondering on, having meetings about, and just going around the table about was the launch of our financial stability coaching program. And I had been, just like I said, in lots of meetings about it, but we just could not bring it together. I couldn't get it organized. And in the one-on-one calls I had with the VITA leadership team, it really helped me to put why this is necessary, why our community needed, and to put it in terms where our partners understood why this was a necessary program. So I'm so proud to announce that we did launch that program. And I'm going to tell you, this was a year and a half in the making, and it took 6 months with the VITA leadership team for me to actually get this going. So we launched it beginning of January, and then the pandemic hit. So, but I'm excited to say that even during this pandemic, we've gained some momentum, it's gained some attention. We've had clients go through it successfully, and we've had positive feedback about it. So that's one of my major successes, and I'm so excited that you guys were able to help me implement this. Another one was our coalition that I'm over, our Financial Stability Coalition, was very stagnant. And we have members that were just, they were not active, they were not engaged. And with the one-on-one mentorship through the VITA leadership team, you guys were able to give me some ideas on how to engage them, how to get them involved. And I'm excited that every time I go on a coalition call, it was once monthly, but now we're meeting bi-weekly, and they're wanting to meet, they're wanting to talk, they're wanting to discuss these issues. So those are two big issues that I had going into joining the VITA leadership team. And I'm excited to see that this is having some forward momentum in my community.
Mm-hmm. That's great. Congratulations. And it's interesting to hear how the coalition is meeting more often, especially as we go virtual here. I think that's sometimes the hardest thing to do virtually. So if you all have questions on the call for Carrie and Katrina, our audience, you can type in the questions box and we can ask them later. My next question for them right now, though, is how did the pandemic affect your work, and what did you do to mitigate those effects? Katrina, I'm going to start with you this time.
Okay. Well, I will say the pandemic actually brought our work to a screeching halt. So what I did was when the pandemic first happened, I initially had to close all of my VITA sites. So what I did is we pushed our FSA service through My Free Taxes, and those whose returns weren't finished, we were scrambling to make those calls to get their tax returns done. So we had to think outside the box to get this done. And I will say, well, I'm not going to go into the next question, but just to answer that specific question, it halted everything, and we just had to think around to get everything going and moving forward from that point.
Yeah, absolutely. Carrie, I know you started talking about the pandemic and how that affected some of your work. So what did you do to mitigate those effects?
Well, there we were, moving along, doing taxes. We were ahead of our previous year's efforts and expecting to reach our goal, when all of a sudden, yes, we know what happened. And it was the middle of March, and we were shut down. I should say that Granite United Way also runs 211 in New Hampshire, which was designated by the state of New Hampshire as the COVID hotline. So that impacted even being able to communicate with our tax callers, because up until then, tax-related calls was the leading call to 211 in New Hampshire for the entire year. Just with the calls that are made from January to April, those add up to the number one reason people call 211 in New Hampshire. And that got really pushed off the radar screen by the tens of thousands of calls that we're suddenly being asked by folks around every aspect of the pandemic that you can imagine. So what we did was to kind of huddle among ourselves, and like Katrina, all of our sites were shut down. We had to examine how we could do that, and the IRS did come out with some guidance on virtual as they defined it. They were talking about no contact whatsoever. We were able to move forward, and as I said, 2 of our sites jumped into the game and really became the places where people could call to get connected to scan and send their documents and move forward. And you know, we're very proud of what we were able to do. So in terms of just the context of how big our program is, on an annual basis, we'll normally do about 5,000 tax returns, and this year we did a little over 4,000. So we were, you know, most of the way there, and about 1,200 of those were done under the pandemic. So we were able to change to what I described, get a lot of returns done, answer a lot of questions. And one of the things, and you mentioned, Dara, that we were noting in our wrap up of the VLI that we had been able to make some adjustments to our coalition, refining it. And Vicki, I see you there. AARP and the tax aid program has been a part of our program for a long time, part of our coalition. I chair, and Granite United Way leads the Cash Coalition of New Hampshire, and we've had participation from AARP tax aid for a long time. That got brought into stark relief when we kind of had to say, how can we support each other under these circumstances and get the work done? We had an addition to the coalition that was, you know, not designed to specifically address the pandemic, but it really did turn out to be very helpful in a very specific way. That organization was the Coalition Against Sexual and Domestic Violence. So we had someone who was a survivor of, I'm sorry, an AmeriCorps Vista working with survivors who were in obviously a situation that we were very sensitive to. And then adding to that, you know, not only are they in a shelter escaping a very difficult situation in many cases, but they're also now dealing with how the pandemic affects their lives. So we were able to utilize their resources, including case management, to help with things like doing FSA. So, you know, you had a caseworker working with a survivor who they did have access to a computer, but they needed the assistance in being able to talk through how to do the return. And so, you know, it was very, very rewarding. I would say, you know, it's been the most rewarding part of this work that I've done throughout my career.
Oh, wonderful. Yeah, that's great. I think something interesting that you mentioned was that moving from in-person to virtual meant that you didn't necessarily have to work with a preparer who would have been at your specific local VITA shop. Someone from across the state could do that return, so it allowed some efficiencies. I asked that same question of one of our other cohort members, Christopher Murphy of the Louisville Asset Building Coalition, who wasn't able to join us today, but he mentioned that a challenge was working with volunteers that were not located in a central place, and using successful software and investing in that was really important in order to communicate with volunteers and to make the preparation model successful for both clients and taxpayers and preparers. So that's very interesting. I'm going to combine my next 2 questions. So Katrina, I'll go to you again. What did you learn from the impact of the pandemic, and what missteps did you make?
I guess the main thing I did learn from the impact is have a contingency plan. And I'm just going to admit this, and I'll only admit this here, and I won't ever admit this again. So everything that I needed to continue to run my VITA program effectively, I heard about it from the VITA leadership team from the very first meeting in Colorado. They discussed alternative service delivery options. It was also brought up in our meetings about alternative service delivery options. I was intrigued by them, but I really felt I was that small percentage that felt that my volunteers weren't ready to implement a new program. And I can kick myself so many times. I just think about it like, oh my God. So that's one of the main things, is that I did not pick up on those contingency plans. Although no one knew we had this pandemic, but anything else could have happened. You know, we could have had a fire, we could have had a flood, we could have had a hurricane like we normally do here. So I should have picked up on those contingency plans, and I should have ran with them, because at the end of the day, we were thrown into it anyways, and we had to do it. Another thing with the missteps on not having a contingency plan is that we should have stuck to our program procedures. That was something that was talked about a lot in the VITA leadership team. I spent a lot of time after the shutdown going through a lot of client paperwork that was not even prepared to file their taxes. We have procedures laid out for if a client didn't have all their taxes, they need to reschedule. We're not going to keep their paperwork. But what I found is that when I went in to clean out our offices, we had stacks and stacks of paperwork, and I was making so many calls just to find out where they were in this process. So we need to stick to our program procedures, and that's something I'm going to be a real stickler about in the upcoming tax season.
Great. Yeah, it's certainly important. You know, it's important, of course, to be flexible, because things like a pandemic can happen, but you know, having those contingency plans definitely important. So it's good to learn. Before I turn to you, Carrie, I'm going to share what Christopher shared with us about this, that he learned, and I think this was true for not just VITA programs, but for community-based organizations everywhere, is how much digital literacy and the digital divide are still an issue in the US and in our communities. And so it was difficult to for those who don't have access to internet or technology, it was of course difficult to access VITA services as well as the stimulus payments. So that was a learning that we're all still trying to cope with, of course. But the misstep that he said his program made was that by the end of the filing season, the extended filing season, they were overextended by the number of clients wishing to access their services. And so what he learned, you know, you mentioned procedures, Christina, was that you should have procedures in place working virtually to limit the number of clients you can accept documents from at a given time, so as not to overload your taxpayers, but also to set expectations with clients. So Carrie, again, same question. What did you learn from the impact of the pandemic, and what missteps did you make?
Well, first you say, what did we learn, as if it's in the past tense. I think it's important to acknowledge to everyone that we are still in the pandemic. We will be opening our tax sites in 21 in the pandemic. And so let's take this moment where I've been saying, you know, we have time now. It's October, so we do have time, but the clock is ticking. And to say, all right, we've now learned about these different alternative delivery models, and to say, yes, we need to acknowledge there is a digital divide, and how can we incorporate all of these resources in such a way that we're addressing that we've learned that virtual VITA, no contact, what the IRS is now calling 100% virtual, works for a segment of our population, but by no means all, maybe half. So it's being able to address the digital, not only the digital divide, but the digital literacy divide that I think you said, Chris had mentioned, to say we need to have additional people doing the initial contact with taxpayers on the phone, so that we're able to walk them through not only this procedure, but we were talking about people who may have the app to scan documents on their phone, but they don't know how to use it. So someone with enough IT savvy and patience to work with people who can work virtually. We're learning about doing triage and helping people who have various levels of tech literacy and capability. How can we funnel them? How can we be prepared for all of the different contingencies? I don't know if you can be prepared for all of them, but to say, let's rank the service delivery models in order, which at this moment would seem to be something resembling drop-off intake would be our lead effort. Virtual is probably second, but limited only because of the technology challenges. getting to the FSA model in place so that we're able to work with people who do have their own computers and don't know how to use them as well as they can, certainly don't know tech, tax software or taxes. But again, with people who are patient enough to work with them over the phone, if we're able to give them that individual unique login and help them learn, and I think we'll be better off there. The in-person traditional method remains on the table, but I think it's probably the least likely that a resource or way of doing taxes that we'll be doing things, at least at this moment. And then to keep in mind that things could change. If we were to get shut down again, I know no one wants to consider that, but at least we've had a precedent. We've learned how to do it, and we can take a deep breath and activate method 2. Plan B becomes plan A, even as we continue to go all the way to plan D. It's also a challenge for our volunteers. I mentioned some volunteers doing intake will have to learn how to do a more extensive intake that could include IT assistance for callers. It could also mean some folks, based on their personality, may be more comfortable working from home. And it's not only their personality, it's the 81-year-old volunteer at one of our sites who said, if I'm going to be continuing to see people, I'm done. But she embraced working from home and didn't have to face folks. She was very comfortable doing the work she was doing. So we're calling it do you want to do taxes in person or in PJs? How do you feel more comfortable contributing to this effort? At the same time, there were callers who said, I'm going to embrace this technology stuff, even though I'm not really good at it, because it means getting my taxes done. Did we make missteps? Yes, absolutely. Will we make missteps in the upcoming tax season? Yeah, I think so. But it's continuing to learn and continuing to have in mind the best interests of our clients at heart, and particularly the safety of our team as well as our clients.
Yeah, that's a great point. I love that. Doing taxes in person or from PJs. Very good. Katrina, I'm going to read a comment that came in via the questions box. So I hope this person doesn't mind that I'm reading this out loud, but I think they're responding to your comment about procedures in place, that this was their first year managing the VITA Coalition. And I'm sure from the onset, their team was told that they weren't going to do anything new delivery-wise. So much for that plan. And yes, Carrie, I don't think anyone could have had a contingency plan in place for a pandemic like this. So yeah, we learned a lot, certainly. Final question for you both. How did participation in VLI and what you learned the past year affect your program, your leadership, and or your community? So Katrina, I'll start with you.
The first thing I want to mention is that being a participant in the VLI, it allowed me to see beyond my own community. Sometimes we're just working, and we're so hyper-focused on our community, but we don't realize is that the financial stability work that we do in our community has an effect nationwide. So it made me realize that we're working together, and I was part of a team, and it's not just about my counties that I'm working with. So it made me see the bigger picture and what I'm actually contributing on a national level to financial stability. So that's one, and by allowing me to see that, it caused me to be a better leader, a better program manager, and it just overflowed into the community. I was able to actually, by partnering with the VITA Leadership Institute or VITA Leadership team, I was able to make some connections and actually think outside the box. I was able to bring in other resources and other wraparound services that would help my client. One thing I was able to do was offer an alternative banking solution to our clients, which was very valuable. This is the first year I did not have a call about somebody's cousin spending their tax money. So it was a very valuable asset to our program. And it allowed me to also think about what other organizations I can partner with and what other gaps in our community is missing. So it was a very effective in causing me to grow and break outside of my little box that I thought I was in and see the bigger picture.
Great. Thank you for sharing that, Katrina. And before we go over to questions with Justin, Carrie, same question for you. How did participation in VLI and what you learned the last year affect your program, community, et cetera, your leadership?
Yeah, thank you, for that. And Katrina, it's great to share this platform with you, and tough to follow you. You're so much fun and bring so much to the program. I would say that from my own perspective, it's the VLI experience helped me think more critically about our program, even at this level of my years of experience. It doesn't mean I've learned everything there is to know. I've picked up some things along the way, but at the same time, still learning from each other, and still learning about, even down to as recently as yesterday, when some of us participated or attended the symposium that IRS had about looking forward and how will we do virtual, that it's breaking down to all the component parts of filing a tax return that we had kind of, taking it on as naturally as breathing, but it's, appointment scheduling, and how do we do tax consents and authentication. And then, I mean, it breaks down all these pieces, and it's as if, you're teaching your child how to walk, or, a few years down the road, teaching your child how to drive a car. The things that we don't think about in terms of just getting in the car, starting it up, and driving away, in terms of stop, adjust the rear view mirror, adjust these things, make sure all of those basic lessons are in place, to really think very critically and very particularly about how to make sure that these things are done right, that we're protecting certainly the security and confidentiality of our taxpayers' information, but the safety of our taxpayers, something we hadn't really had to think much about in the past, other than, make sure that if someone falls, that you report it, or make sure that they're healthy. But this idea of looking at our communities, the thinking in terms of, oh yeah, I hadn't thought about that person or that type of resource to add to our coalition. Maybe we should do that. And then, more to come from this work in progress, but thinking about our work and all specific aspects of it.
Great. Thank you for sharing that. And thanks to both of you for, answering some of our questions for you. I'm going to turn it over to Justin now to facilitate some of the questions we got in the question box and to carry us out. Okay, Justin.
All right. Thanks, Dara. And we've been keeping an eye on your questions, answering them throughout the conversation. Really enjoyed hearing a little bit about what you guys had to say. This question is coming from Carla Davis, and she's talking a little bit about her volunteer missing each other, maybe more than they miss serving their taxpayers in person. And they want to figure out how to keep in touch even though they're apart. So do you have any recommendations for how Carla can do that?
Yeah, this is Carrie. I'll say that we have talked about having some of our sessions with taxpayers, or tax preparers rather, gathering in the normal setting, but without taxpayers, so they're able to do the returns and ask each other questions and facilitate that, but also have that socialization, because that's an opportunity. And I think without the taxpayers there, it adds a different dimension, but we're going to have to see how that will play out with people socially distanced, but still being able to interact and be present with each other.
I'm going to agree with Carrie. I'm also offering a virtual, giving them the option to do taxes virtually, as well as doing taxes on site without clients. So and I was very surprised to find out that a lot of my volunteers, they want to be at the site. Our site is large enough where we can actually space them out, and they can be within CDC guidelines where they can actually prepare taxes, and there's no concern for that. So that's one thing. Another thing is that I want to I've made sure that I've connected with them, just shoot them an email, call them, and they actually enjoy the Zoom calls that we do, just because we can see each other. So, and it makes them feel like they're still part of a team. So that's one thing that I've been doing, just to stay connected and asking them how they're doing, and they don't feel left out. They still feel like they're part of our VITA team.
Awesome. And Katrina, there's a question for you here. This person likes to hear a little bit more about who the partners are and the products you're using for your banking accounts. This is from Anne Schooner from CFR.
The partner I'm using for the bank accounts is called Community Financial Resource. They are based out of, if I'm not mistaken, California, and their product is called the Focus Card. I was really impressed with this product because it offers not only a checking account, but they can also have a savings account connected with this card. And they're not checking any type of credit or any type of check systems. And the fees are, they have very little fees. Like if you go and get a Rush card or you go to get the Walmart card, there's fees associated with everything you do on this card. So with the Focus Card, I think there's probably only one fee, and it's very minimal. So it's actually saving them money. They don't have to pay out of pocket for it. And the cool thing about this is that when I'm doing their taxes, and no one tells you to the end when you're about to send out this tax return that they don't have a bank account. So I was able to say, hey, don't worry about it. Let me open you an account. I could do it within 2 minutes and have their account number and routing number right there in front of us within 2 minutes. So I was very pleased with this partnership I did with Community Financial Resource.
Awesome. Thank you so much. Perfect. Thank you so much, Katrina, for answering that question. And I think we have time for one more question, and I think we can level it to both of you. And this is going to be a little bit about sort of looking forward, and what is something we have here in the question box? What's something that you're sort of looking forward to for this filing season? I know we talked a little bit about the last one, but what are you looking forward to for this filing season?
April 16th. No, I think it's to take an attitude of looking forward to the way we're going to serve people, that we're continuing to serve people, and the gratitude that they always express is a wonderful thing. If we can say, yeah, there may be some bumps in the road ahead, but we don't know, and we don't know what they will be. But I'm looking forward to see how we address them and how we overcome them.
I'm actually seeing this upcoming tax season as an opportunity. I know it's going to be a lot different, but one thing that I'm thinking about is that I can reach more people, and I can have more volunteers who are unable, their schedule doesn't allow them to actually come to the site. So I'm seeing this as an opportunity to do more with our program. One of the things I had a problem with last year was I just could not be everywhere, but I can virtually. So I think it's going to be a great opportunity for us, and I want to see how well we do this year.
Awesome. Thank you, both of you, for your questions. And I think we're getting close to the top of the hour, so I think now would be a great time to go on to the next slide and talk a little bit about what some of our final thoughts and things that we're going to be doing going forward. So we have quite a lot of stuff for you. We'll talk a little bit about those on the next slide. So if you can see, we got a great amount of ton projects on the horizon. The first one for us is part of this webinar. We have a brand new VITA Leadership Institute webpage. You'll receive an email link with that after this webinar, and it'll have all of the worksheets and all of the findings from there in this beautiful sort of template to help you organize your thoughts going into the filing season, share some of the insights that we saw at the VITA Leadership Institute, and you can help implement them then at your site going forward. But after that, we also have on the future, we have the VITA Train. This is our third annual train. It's coming around through the station. It is our tax law training. We've bumped it up to advanced level this year after some feedback. We've tried to make sure we've got enough integration, especially for any virtual efforts, as well as we have some more informal conversations with our module updaters and some of our VITA superstars to really talk through what volunteers should expect and really help get them ready for the upcoming filing season, especially if you're going to be doing a fully virtual training. And then finally for TON, we also have our Knights of the Tax Roundtable. based off of, the Arthurian legend. We have some VITA superstars, Carrie being one of them, talking about some of the hot topics for this year. So we currently have 3 live videos on our Prosperity Now YouTube channel right now. This is quality, planning, and FinCap integration. So these are 3 huge topics that a lot of you guys can talk about. We have some really great VITA practitioners on those videos, so we highly recommend you check those out. And if you aren't a member of the Tax Roundtable listserv, you can go to the link on screen right now, which is taxroundtable.groups.io, or search Tax Roundtable listserv in whatever search engine of your preference, and that will get you to where you're going. Other than that, please complete the survey that's going to come up on screen at the end of this webinar. Thank you to all of our speakers, and thank you once again for taking the time to join us during this VLI call. We all learned a lot this year, but we've got a ton going on, whether in PJs or in person. Can't wait to talk to you throughout the next filing season. Have a great day. Goodbye.